is nailed down by a reliable peer-reviewed source. So I mentioned sources of emission-free energy. They're solar, wind, geothermal, hydro. But nuclear actually supplies more of our emission, virtually, I have to say virtually because there is some carbon in the life cycle of nuclear, but it's lower than, it's about equal to that of wind and lower than that of solar. So the sources for baseload electricity I mentioned already. Hydro, we're kind of tapped out on hydro, and because of droughts, especially in the West, hydro is diminishing, actually. So there are really only two major sources available to us for baseload electricity. That's the steady, round-the-clock energy that meets the demand, the basic, steady demand of our society. And the consequences of the two forms of baseload you can see on the one hand, very little waste produced by nuclear power, 2,000 tons per year of spent fuel as opposed to 120 million tons of solid waste and 2 gigatons of carbon dioxide. So it's a no-brainer choosing between nuclear and coal, and that helped me, that moved me toward nuclear too. Nuclear has the smallest carbon footprint. This is the comprehensive lifetime, the life of nuclear power, the whole cycle, as opposed to, say, the comprehensive life cycle of coal. And you can barely see nuclear down there at the very bottom. So a few myths were dismantled for me by talking to many different scientists and engineers. No nuclear power plant can explode atomically. That's not the way physics works. The reactors are located deep underground, anchored in bedrock, and always enclosed by many barriers. Also, this is one of my favorite facts. You've probably been handed some of these things outside in the lobby. This is one nuclear fuel pellet. This is actually a mock-up of one. It's not a real one. But, real fuel before it's gone through the reactor, probably you could hold it up. It's not that radioactive. So this weighs as much as 3 pennies, and it contains the same amount of energy as about a ton of coal, slightly less than a ton of coal. Or you can see the other comparisons there. So it's extremely compact. It's extremely energy dense. For that reason, the waste is very small. If you got all your electricity from only nuclear power for your lifetime, your share would be not even fill a Coke can of those pellets. And you can see the volume for coal, what your share would be. Not pretty. Just to give you another example of waste and volume, the Sandia Mountains outside Albuquerque take up about the same amount of mass as if you could solidify all the carbon dioxide emitted from all the world's power plants for 1 year. It would be about the size of the Sandia Mountains, which are big mountains if you've ever been to Albuquerque. And you can see that the world's spent nuclear fuel would all fit in a big townhouse. People always bring up waste, and that was certainly my preoccupation too. I went both to Yucca Mountain and the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant, which Dr. Amy is going to speak about later in the evening. I became persuaded that both of those places are very safe, and I read a lot of the research and documentation, and I am not concerned about either of those storage places for thousands of years, but it's likelier that we're going to recycle because 98% of the energy in spent fuel is still there after it's been one trip through the reactor. Anyway, I like this fact. All of our spent fuel could fit inside a Home Depot. All the spent fuel we've generated in the United States in over 40 years. And in 1 year, we discard 179,000 tons of toxic batteries. And, by the way, the toxic heavy metal in batteries never decays. It's going to be around till the end of the planet. What about radiation, though? You can see from this radiation sources that for some reason it's not hitting the screen. Oh, there it is. Okay, this is our big radiation exposure right here, medical x-rays. And in fact, today the average American gets as much from medical radiation as from Mother Nature, about 300 millirem a year. Here in Denver, I always mention Denver because if anyone who had lived around Chernobyl wanted to get away from that horrible place and start a new life without radiation and move to Denver, they would actually be increasing their radiation exposure because the natural radiation here is quite high. I learned that shielding stops all rays and particles. And there are different kinds of rays and particles, and you can see their penetration abilities. Now, a friend of mine was watching a video of me giving the same presentation, and she was eating a banana. She was having her breakfast and watching the video on her computer. And when she got to this piece of information, she spat out the banana she was eating in alarm. As it happens, if you eat a banana, it contains a kind of potassium isotope and potassium-40, and it's actually more, you're exposing yourself to more radiation than if you lived next to a nuclear power plant for a year, which is virtually nothing. Currently, the move is that the spent fuel is being taken out of pools of water where it's cooled. These are heavily secured pools, and moved to what they call dry cask storage, and it will be safe there for 100 years. It's probably not going to sit there for 100 years because it's going to be taken out and recycled. The technology for this is advancing. It's already being done in other countries like Europe and Japan. So my message is always look at the whole and keep the big picture in mind. It's very important that we must act now. Keep in mind the journey from myth to fact. We owe it to ourselves as developing human beings on this planet to, when we're told some fact, like, do you know that 100,000 people were killed by Chernobyl? Check it out. Check out the international studies on that. The Chernobyl Forum, 10 or 12 international agencies, they did huge studies, follow-up studies, and that's just really not what happened and is not happening. So get real science-based information from universities, from sound sources. Together, we have to face the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced. And to do this, we have to have interdependence and cooperation. This is from the woman, the first woman to command a space shuttle. And I love this observation, and I love this picture, that she saw that the Earth was round for real from space, and her reaction. Looking at the Earth's atmosphere and seeing how thin it is, you realize the Earth is a very fragile planet. The power to save the world does not lie in rocks, rivers, wind, or sunshine. It resides in each of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cravens. Her book, Power to Save the World, should be available out in the lobby after all the speakers. And as I already said, we'll hold questions and dialogue with the speakers until the very end.